Robots are all over the place now. At conferences like this one, here at Tech in Heilbronn, they opened the stage with a dance performance. Just a few weeks ago in Beijing, humanoids ran a half marathon and beat the fastest runners. And if you live in Hamburg, you might already be getting your parcels delivered by autonomous robots on wheels. So why does this matter? Robotics is having its ChatGPT moment, and the technology may not be production ready yet, but yeah, with shows and pilot projects, companies are showing what robots could one day do. And one thing is becoming clear: as soon as the technology really works, autonomous robots will change how we live and work. So that's why we need to get ready. And this is exactly what we are talking about today. Welcome to the Handelsblatt Tech Show. In this format, we talk about the key technologies that matter most for businesses and society, like AI, like robots, like quantum computers. And who is we? That's me, Larissa Holzki, and...
Me, Retterath.
So, and these are our guests today. He's the founder and CEO of Neura Robotics, a startup building humanoid robots right here in the region. He brings us the builder's perspective. Welcome to the show, David Reger.
Thanks for having me.
She has spent many years in the oil and gas industry and brought robots into production there, most recently as robotics program lead at BP. Today is her very first day at Korial, where she will be the VP Customer Success. She brings us the operator's perspective. Great to have you here, Sue and Marquis.
Thank you very much.
And he's also in the middle of a transition. After many years at the German Aerospace Center, he built his own spin-off, Robosection, and he's now incoming director at Fraunhofer IPA. He brings us the science perspective. Welcome, Michael Suppa.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
And finally, it wouldn't be a robo show without any robots here. He doesn't have a lot to say, but wants to say hi, I guess. David, this one is yours. What kind of robot is this, and what can you do?
So what you see here is like for anyone mini. So it's actually a version made for research education, because at this time there is actually not really much choice on the market. So we also developed a smaller version of it. So it was not a plan from the beginning, because we really like our aim is actually building robots for production and really useful devices. But it's pretty cool to have a smaller version where you can try things on and then actually deploy it like by just a click on the larger version. That's actually why we build it.
And there's a lot more to learn, and yeah, that's exactly what we're here to figure out.
Yes.
And on the positive side, it can also travel in a plane, as I just learned.
Yes, we had actually one traveling in the plane. So I don't know how they did it, but somehow like some of our team members made a great job of persuading them.
But did you need to buy him a ticket?
Yeah, we bought a ticket. It was 13A, like the seat 13A. And it was actually, I think it was the first one ever. So we should have made a better story out of it, but I just got some pictures of it. Yeah.
I mean, maybe it will be common. So, David, Sue, and Michael, you all work with robots constantly, much more than the average person. But maybe there are also everyday situations that show how robotics is increasingly entering all of our lives. When did you last interact with a robot? And this one doesn't count. Sue?
Yeah, pretty much every day. So like you mentioned, I came from BP, and it's a part of my everyday working life, but also at home. So for example, I'm here today in Germany, but as somebody who's very busy but does not like to do any kind of housework, I have a nice robot that cleans my floors for me. I have my garden being taken care of by a lawnmower. So I have robots both in the lab. I test out and we evaluate both software and hardware in the lab at BP and now at Korial, and also at home as well.
Michael, what about you?
Yeah, of course, in my regular day work, I see a lot of robots. But also, I came from a holiday yesterday from Tuscany, and the last robot I saw was actually yesterday, the lawn mowing robot on this agricultural thing where I was actually spending the time. So that was nice. So it's coming to everyday life more and more. It's more common to see robots, and not only in the shop floor, which is very common already.
David?
This morning, I was shortly in office, and guess what? I was going to one of the labs just to see if the robot still works. So, because there is something coming up, some new stuff, and that's actually where I saw the last interaction with the robot.
Looking forward to it. Andre?
I actually visited a friend over the weekend, and they had a pool cleaning robot, for example, but then also I think the lines are really blurring. So a car with lane assistant. Is that a robot? Technically, by some definitions, we have hardware, we have software, so I think we're interacting with it every single day without actually noticing.
And I think I need to explain why a venture capital investor is co-hosting a Handelsblatt show. There's a reason for that. So Andre has access to company data that I, as a journalist, often don't. So, and he recognized very early how to use that kind of data in a systematic way. Today, many people know you not as an early bird investor, but as the founder of Data-Driven VC, a platform all about how to make the right decisions in venture capital using data. And that's exactly what we want to benefit from here. So give us a quick introduction. If we look at the state of robotics by the numbers, what are the most important insights?
Sure. Let's start with some simple slides. So I brought some over here. If you're just on audio on the podcast, that's a reason to now look into the YouTube video channel. So if we look at the robotics funding, it actually grew by 4x within the past 5 years. And more importantly, it's actually expected to double again this year. So we see that the funding boom is just starting, and many people reference 2026 as the year of robotics, and that's specifically a forward-looking indicator on the funding. However, if we look into the backward-looking part, and here and now, we look at the deployments. And if we look at the deployments, we have a bit less than 5 million robots in the field, and we add about 10% of new installations per year. So as the funding is exploding and is very exponentially growing, we see that the actual deployments are lagging behind, and it's more of a consistent linear growth. Now, if we look at the gap between the funding and the actual deployments, the most interesting part that stands out is actually humanoids. If we look at humanoids, every fifth dollar that gets invested into humanoids, but only 0.4% of the deployments today in the field are humanoids. So we see that only every 1/200th robot is actually defined as a humanoid. So there's a significant gap lagging behind. And the big question is, if all of these companies that we see over here, and the most prominent, the highest valued robotics companies in the private market are actually humanoid companies, and we see some over here, for example, Figure, we see some others, including also we have Neura Robotics, we have David on the stage. So these are just the largest and last officially announced funding rounds. For Neura, for example, it was a 120 million round, and the latest valuation that's publicly known is 4 billion. Some of you might read the news, so there is something ongoing, and I don't want to put any more info out here, but something very exciting going on here. We see that actually the highest valued companies are humanoids. So it's a question, is this the robotics investment into the future?
Yeah, and I want to understand what's driving those numbers. Michael, give us the scientific perspective in a nutshell. What's actually behind this new excitement around robots?
Yeah, I think it's that we finally get the feeling that we find the general purpose tool, right? So it was always that robots had a specific task, and they were basically placed into a deployment. You had the integrator, you had a lot of effort to build it into the automation chain. And also with coming the humanist perspective, it looks like that this step gets easier. So you have really the general purpose tool on the horizon, and that enables a grand hype because you see that a lot of more tasks may be applicable to that. And I think that's in the combination with the available compute. So, old automation is PLCs, no compute, everything like in a very organized way. And now you come to more general perspective where you have generic models that can be used for more than one task. Before it was you tune into one task, you have it, you task with the next task, you tune again. This way opens up a completely new horizon that this generality not speaking about dexterity yet, but all that comes to more reality with less integration effort. That at least the hope that's behind that.
David, you can bring this to life. When you started Neura in 2019, robots could only solve problems they were programmed for, but you wanted to build a robot that can hear, feel, think, and see, and therefore understand new tasks and problems when they arise. Looking back, how much of that was actually possible back then, and how much has changed since then?
So at the time when I started, I think I would use like an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours for just explaining artificial intelligence. And I think today the good thing about ChatGPT is that everyone gets it, and understands why it's real. It can do something and the same and here physical AI is the next level of AI. It's the next level which can actually not just maybe understand and answer questions, but actually do really act in this physical world. And this is for sure one of the I would say the largest step of humanity going forward is for sure combining artificial intelligence and in a physical embodiment basically, and doing real stuff which only humans can do today. So and this is basically also where it goes and why you see the numbers of investments, because it's the logical next step we're going to.
So, and you spend years at companies that actually deploy autonomous systems. You can give us an understanding of how significant those changes are. How many tasks are actually programmable? And how important is it that they become more flexible?
Many tasks, and many more tasks that operators or the end customer want to admit can actually be pre-programmed, and it's probably a bit less than the vendor will tell you. So the real number is actually in between those two. So we have today inspection robotics that would go around and replicate the sight, smell, gas sensing, etc. activities for operator rounds, for example. And operator rounds, if you think about an operator round in a live environment, that's pretty much a prescribed, you go around and there are some things you have to tick off, some valves you have to check, etc. And right now we are able to replicate that in the real world. Where we fall short and where we've seen that it falls short and in human interaction still needs to come in is this is a dynamic environment. Refineries, platforms, etc., they're ever changing. And having the AI on top of that to be able to respond to these changes, that's what we need to work on now for full autonomy.
And this much is clear. What's happening here has a lot to do with the breakthrough of large language models, the kind we all got to know with ChatGPT. And just like with language, this opens a whole new range of possibilities. I don't want to get too technical, but for the AI curious in the room, the models being used in robotics or physical AI are actually built in a very similar way than LLMs. Still, it's not yet settled which data you need to train them on, and your startup, Michael, takes a slightly different approach than David's. Can you quickly walk us through what's behind language action models at Roboception and the perception models at Neura?
We are coming a bit from the classical automation still, where you have the classical pipeline, and we're using the AI models in the classical pipeline, where it's kind of independent of which robot you want to use. You don't train the kinematics and so on. This is why the action part is a little bit less here. So basically action is classical, and the learning phase is basically based on synthetic data and so on, which allows us to have smaller models. In the case, usually we don't know ahead which kind of robots we're going to use for the application, which is different, I guess, to what David is doing when he has a robot and the embodied AI in it, and he can train it on the specific system using teleoperation or other tasks. So it depends really if you're focusing on the perception or the perception tightly coupled with the action and the device that you're using. So I think that's one of the main differences that I see to date.
We need to talk about teleoperation later, but first you, David.
I see physical AI mainly as a brain which can actually not just see, but actually hear, see, feel, and actually think. And this is basically where what we call perception language action model, like basically a model which is multi-model. So it means like you have more encoders, not just a vision encoder, but actually tactile encoders and audio encoders, while actually being able to train them faster. And then the next big step, which we will soon announce a little bit more about and release in foundation model from Neura, is basically based on a two-layer architecture. So it means that you're having more than just a brain. You're having also like a nervous system, because that's actually the game changer in the physical world. The simple example for that I always use is like learning how to swim. If you want to learn how to swim, you can't watch a video. Even you're watching it for 5 years, you will not be a swimmer, and that's something I can guarantee. So don't try out yourself if you're not a swimmer. But the thing is, it's because you can't train swimming just by your brain. It is more required. So, and this is basically you're going into the water and then training also your nervous system, how to react, how is the reflexes of your lungs, of your muscles, the memory effect of your muscles, and then train it to actually be a swimmer. And the same for the most of the physical task. It's like not just understanding how to grasp it, but actually also while grasping it, like, how to say it, adjusting yourself and reacting on it. Like grasping something and pulling water inside will change the weight of the part you're grasping. So it should naturally actually adjust its pressure, and that's only possible by the shear forces. So it's a very small logic inside.
And what does feel actually means when we talk robotics?
The feel of touch. So when it touches something, it knows it touched something.
Yeah. And regardless of which approach turns out to be right, I have a strong feeling of why robotic startups have become more interesting for investors. This isn't a pure hardware game anymore. This is all about software. Do you agree? And would you say this trend will get even stronger?
If I just think back, so I've been investing for Erlebt for the past decade into AI, and it started across different dimensions. Like if we look at also the frontier foundation models today, we have the one-dimensional, which is text, and we have code that's publicly available out there, and you can scrape it, you can train these models, which is why we see the most prominent AI applications today being in coding and also having the highest impact on productivity. If we look into two-dimensional, we suddenly have, for example, pixels. So we talk about images, or we talk about the x-axis being the time, and then we have oscillations. That's voice, that's audio. Now we look into the three-dimensional part, and the three-dimensional part is really different frames after each other. So we talk about video. And actually lots of people confuse video with what we call today the world models. Because in the video, you have an action, but you do not have a reaction. So you cannot freely navigate within this world. So there's the new term of world models. And I think this is now finally getting closer to what David and the others in the round have described as physical AI, because we try to bridge the virtual and the physical world. Now, the problem is, the further we get in these dimensions, the less data is actually available. So as we can scrape the whole web on text, code, images, for example, and you can easily train these models, for physical AI or robotic models, actually very little of this data is available. So that's a bit of the holy grail when it comes to these foundation models. Now, to your point, investors feel very comfortable in the software world because it's also very scalable, but suddenly there is this hardware component that's also required to collect this physical data. You need to have humans in the field. You need to have robots with different sensors running around to collect the data to train these physical frontier models. So for us as investors, there's like a huge hope into the future that now as we collect more of this physical data, we will actually have more intelligent hardware and software systems. But the question is, how do they go into production? So talking about this big gap, and I had that on a slide previously, between the funding and the reliability part. I also have one chart actually on this one over here. We see when we talk about reliability requirements in the industrial world, we need to have at least 99.9% reliability. And that's the biggest issue. If you get to 99% reliability with the frequency of operations that we see in the industrial environment, we will still approach 80 to 100 failures a day. And within an industrial environment, you can just purely not afford to do this. This might be fine if you have, like, I don't know, a robot at home cleaning the dishes, yeah, if you break a dish. But if you are in a production plant, that's a completely different ballpark. And that's one of the key bottlenecks that we have today when we talk about what is the reliability we can achieve with humanoids and what is required in industrial versus in consumer environments.
To put this into context, dancing performances are currently the biggest use case for humanoids. It's early days for them in production. BMW, for example, just announced a second test to integrate them into serial car production. Automotive supplier Schaeffler, together with robotics partners like Neura and Hexagon and Humanoid, wants to bring thousands of robots into production by the early 2030s. But that's the absolute exception, has much to do with Schaeffler betting on becoming a key supplier in the robotics industry itself. Sue-Ann from BP, you know very well that there's always a time lag between developers announcing new features and having them actually deployed. As VP Customer Success at Korial, you'll probably need to do a bit of expectation management. What can robots do in the real world as of today?
Primarily, as mentioned before, pre-prescribed running of missions, that's deployed today. What is, I guess, the lag is the AI component on top of it, where decisions need to be made and really replicating the operator round, because right now, pre-prescribed operator rounds, you still need someone there. And that's, you mentioned that deployment lag. That's one of the biggest things as well. We're talking as a vendor now, we're talking about alleviating the workforce and making it more efficient as well as safer. So yes, you talked about the technology getting to a reliable spot so that the safety component is taken care of. But when we look at the efficiency spot, we're still not 100% there. If you still have to have a human in the loop for the majority of tasks, then I'm now burdening the workforce, and then that puts off the adoption of new technology, if you know what I mean. And so that's one of the biggest components for seeing that lag between, for example, a new feature. There's so many nuances that we need to go through. There's the safety element. We're changing in these very complex organizations. You're changing workflows, oftentimes not involving the key stakeholders, for example, the operators on the ground. Is this the correct thing that we should be focusing on? So there's a lot of things that are quite a lot more complex. The data stack, the digital architecture that needs to be happening. Is the data going to be collected? Who owns the data? Is it sitting next to what we currently have? Am I burdening my workforce? And if you're doing anything like that, you're sure to keep that gap as wide as it is.
And the truth is, even the show robots are often not as autonomous as they appear. When someone shows you their autonomous robot, always look for the guy with the remote control. Most robots at trade fairs are still pre-programmed or teleoperated, but don't think that means that you can't deploy them. Take the example of Neo. The US company develops household robots that unload your dishwasher for $500 a month. A reporter at Wall Street Journal found out it doesn't do that on its own. There's actually a real person behind it, maybe on the other side of the world, with a VR headset and controller, putting your plates in the cupboard. So, Michael, if the core of that revolution is that housekeepers can work from home now, I'll be disappointed. But there's more to this than that. So tell us how teleoperation really works and how it helps to teach these machines and why this could even be a business case.
Yeah, I think teleoperation is really a very old technology, and it was actually developed for cases like space robotics or medical robotics, where you have an operator and this operator has to move a robot that is either far away or somehow disconnected from the operator. In space, we have long latency, so we try to compensate that. That was the origins, so to say, of teleoperation, 30 years old or even older. And nowadays, it has two roles. On the one hand, it's for teleoperation of robots when you don't have the local autonomy. We called it shared autonomy at the time. So you have a teleoperator and you have some autonomous function on the robot. That's one way. The second is now for training, right? You use robots a lot for teleoperation. When you move it and you get the expertise of the operator into the robot in the training data set. So it's a new application of teleoperation, which can actually be used a lot. So what we need to achieve is to get more autonomy in the systems. There's two ways. One, you have larger training sets, or on the other hand, you have this kind of shared autonomy still, that you have human intervention, same as you have probably with autonomous cars of Waymo. So they still have this driver in the back end in case they need it. But as such, I think it's a very base technology applied over time to very, very different applications, always keeping in mind time lag or basically getting data into the robot, which it was not made for. So that's a little bit the perspective of that. And the question in the end is 99.9% reliability in industry. It is achieved by optimization. So you have a first deployment with your site as a factory acceptance test, then you're at 80 or 85, and then you optimize on site. And I think the main thing we need to give is using technologies such as teleoperation or synthetic data that we are able to optimize on site without large training loops. And the second question that comes with that is also, how do we make a new model release and achieving again 99.9, right? So the customer will never expect a robot that can do less with a release. So you need to make sure that this constant improvement works, and this ends up in separation of models and something like this. It will come to pipelines again at some point. And then teleoperation is one part of that pipeline.
Interesting side note on this actually, because what we see today with software code is that there's lots of throwaway software. So today it's oftentimes easier to just prompt a new software release, for example, and you can quickly deploy it, run against some different kind of robustness tests, and then you can deploy it. So the need for building very much kind of functional software that can build on each other, reference each other, and you have very robust building block becomes less and less, specifically if you want to build like an MVP, you want to deliver like a new release whatsoever. That's completely different in the robotic world, because once you have this reliability of 99.999%, for example, if you have a new release, you need to ensure that it is at least on the same level of reliability. So we will likely not see similar attempts like throwaway software within the robotics world as we see in the traditional software world.
Mm-hmm. David, I think in Europe you can't quite get away with secretly dialing into people's kitchens and living rooms. So in fact, you do use teleoperation to train your robots, but not in people's home, in your robot gym. So can you walk us through what that looks like?
Yes. So first of all, teleoperation is like the foundation of making these robots actually one day real, you know, to get everything what we're doing there. And the simple reason for that is simply no data yet. Or so there is, it's a difference to, let's say, what Anthropic does with basically programming with AI, because there is like all the GitHubs and everything already. You can use it as an example, and that's actually how AI works. The same also on text. You could suck out the whole internet and you have all the information on the world. Coming to the physical world, the only way to get the data out is actually out of you as a human. So we can put humans in data suits. What we do, we have thousands of humans really already in data suits and working on that in the factories.
What does it mean, data suits?
It means actually you have gloves with tactile sensors on, you have a camera on the chest, and you're having basically audio data. So, and what we do is basically let them work, daily work. They're changing the work. It's one of the largest manufacturing company on the planet, which we are working with on that, and they are having like the thousands, millions of different tasks, and we simply let them do every day different tasks many times, and that's how you get actually the data to train your foundation model on. So it's one part is you're getting them out of the data suit, out of the human, and the second actually, and it's the closest to humans actually, out of the robots. And that's actually where we're building this Neura gyms right now for. So, and we are deploying them everywhere on the planet. We started in Germany, like with TU Munich, on the airport in Munich. It's a larger one which will open soon, and there is also others coming up now in Germany on different places where we have actually everyone can go to. It's a public space. It's not for us. It's actually we have our own gyms, but for everyone who wants to actually train their robot for different kind of tasks. And how do you train them? You simply go in one of the suits and actually remote control the robot by doing the task. Let's say 3 hours, 4 hours, and then you're basically just have a button, say train. So first record, train, and then you're getting something back. So with this, we are fine-tuning basically our foundation model. So you're giving the robot a specific knowledge about the task you want to solve.
Mm-hmm. So the idea is also that long-term, not every customer has to teach their robot everything from scratch.
Yes.
Instead, you can pass on already trained skills through your platform,
Exactly.
Neuraverse.
It's the Neuraverse platform. But the importance here is the reason for existence of all the companies in the physical world is for you right now the opportunity to get ahead of your competitors, training your own model on our platform, and then actually it's on you. You can also put it there and sell it, but you will have a huge advantage to others.
And I can easily imagine how this works as a business model, Andre. So in the future, I buy myself a household robot, and for every additional task I wanted to do, cleaning windows and vacuuming and folding T-shirts, I pay extra. So how does that sound from an investor's perspective?
Obviously, business model is a very, very big question for us. Oftentimes, we are completely fine with companies that lose and burn money over many years. This is why venture capital is in the world. So to fund companies that are actually growing, needing to collect to the data, for example, and actually build a feasible business model in long term. But for us, the big question today is obviously B2B versus B2C. For example, in B2C, it's way easier to collect this data. So I'm like very actively listening as you're talking about it. One of the exploding categories we see in startups right now is so-called data foundries. These data foundries are essentially freelance networks around the world where people just put their phone on their head, essentially doing stuff like repairing a car and so on and so forth. So actually collecting this data, and it's exploding like super fast scale. And for us, the big question is, okay, once we have the data, once we have everything like from the hardware side, we have the data, we have the compute, we have the skills in the field, what is actually the most feasible business model? Is it on the consumer side, or is it on the business side? On the business side, there is data saying like a reliable humanoid in an industrial context is probably between $100,000 to $120,000. So the question is, which kind of operations can you operate with that? I know there are lower estimates, there are higher estimates, versus if you have a robot cleaning your dishes at home. You can just afford a completely different price point. You mentioned one before. So if a human is whatever, minimum wage, 15 euro or something an hour, this is how it should come down. And today, at least, we do not see the number coming fast as down as we would need to. So the big question is the feasibility of these business models and when we will get there. Not if, but when.
So, and the big question now is, when does deployment actually make sense for an operator? Does the robot simply have to be cheaper than a human?
Right now, if we think about robot versus human, probably the human oftentimes could turn out to be cheaper than the entire robotic system. And so if we were to only look at it like for like, because the activities are not like for like, for example, there's real case scenarios where the workforce is shrinking, or it might be, we have operators. This is an actual case that I encountered. We had some pump lanes that needed inspecting, but they weren't done as regular. They needed to be done every single shift for continuous monitoring. It was done once a week because the maintenance backlog was taking the priority. That's a very commonplace in the oil and gas sector. So that's a perfect case where automation guarantees that I'm able to, rather than periodic snapshots, continuously monitor. And in the oil and gas sector, we have the efficiency margin, you have the safety margin. In the heavy industry, the safety margin is not completely separate from bottom line. If we think about the catastrophes that's happened in the past couple of decades, Piper Alpha, Texas City, these cause billions of reputational damage. You have people's lives that were lost. This also hits the bottom line. And this is where continuous monitoring, because these are very preventable catastrophes. Continuous monitoring means predictive or preventative maintenance. And that's something that we need to take into consideration when we're looking at the whole economics.
So what's your advice with regard to the transition period, where to invest and what to do to bridge that gap?
I think we need to look at it. We have to start right now. And I'm saying we, both from a vendor side and my past life as of yesterday, from a customer side as well. We have this marriage, we talked about the technology getting there. Perhaps 5-10 years ago, we could have said that the technology wasn't quite there yet. The technology is there. The lag is actually on the customer side. Customers, organizations are not fully ready. And that's a reality that I think, vendors should also, vendors, perhaps we do have the use cases, we do understand our use cases, but the organization is not 100% ready for automation. And that's one of the things that we need to work on. But if we were to delay it any further, that tech lag is going to cost us even more than just the robot. You can buy the robot today or tomorrow. It's that experience and the cost of that experience. If you don't start today, you will become obsolete in the future.
I think also, by the way, the demographic change, that's really the key bottleneck. If you look all around in industrial plants, you cannot just afford to wait another decade because then most of these experts are just gone.
And David gave a great quote in a podcast recently. If you wait until the technology is ready, you won't be around by the time it is. So with that advice, we want to close our session. There's no doubt we are facing a massive shift in human-machine collaboration. It's not yet clear exactly when which capabilities will be production ready, but you've made it very clear why now is the moment to start preparing. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Thanks.
Thank
Thank you so much.